Katherine Martinez pressed her face against the cold airplane window, watching Denver's skyline shrink beneath the billowing clouds. Flight 447 had been climbing steadily for 20 minutes, and she was finally allowing herself to relax when the Boeing 737 suddenly lurched violently to the left. The woman beside her gasped, gripping her armrest with white knuckles. Coffee splashed across Katherine's laptop screen from the cup she'd been holding. Around them, passengers exchanged nervous glances as the aircraft continued to shake with an unnatural, metallic grinding sound that seemed to emanate from somewhere deep within the plane's belly. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Morrison. The voice crackled through the intercom, tense and clipped in a way that immediately commanded attention. We're experiencing some technical difficulties and need to make an emergency landing. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin immediately. Katherine's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd flown hundreds of times for her job as a medical device consultant, but she'd never heard that particular tone in a pilot's voice-controlled panic barely held in check. The grinding sound grew louder, punctuated now by what sounded like electrical sparking. Through the window, she could see they were turning back toward Denver, the city lights growing larger with alarming speed. But something was wrong with their descent angle. They were coming down too fast, too steep. The plane shuddered again, more violently this time, and several passengers cried out in fear. That's when the lights went out. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in an eerie red glow. The grinding sound became a screech of protesting metal. Katherine felt the plane drop suddenly, her stomach lurching into her throat as they fell through an air pocket that seemed to last forever. "Emergency positions, everyone," shouted Sarah Chen, the lead flight attendant Katherine had chatted with during boarding. "Head down, hands over your head, brace for impact." As Katherine folded forward in her seat, her medical training kicked in despite her terror. Around her, she could hear crying, praying, and the flight crew's urgent instructions. But beneath it all was something else, a rhythmic tapping sound that seemed deliberate. Morse code. Someone was trying to communicate. The plane shook again. And Katherine realized with crystalline clarity that whatever was happening to Flight 447, this was no ordinary mechanical failure. The evidence was mounting. The perfect timing of the electrical failure, the specific pattern of the grinding sounds, and now what sounded distinctly like coded communication coming from somewhere in the aircraft as they continued their terrifying descent toward Denver International Airport. Katherine Martinez had no idea that the next 18 hours would test every skill she'd learned as a former Army medic, every connection she'd made in her civilian career, and every ounce of courage she possessed. She was about to discover that Seat 8A had placed her at the center of something much larger and more dangerous than a simple aviation emergency. The plane dropped again, and Katherine closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her grandmother's silver cross against her chest, the same cross that had protected 3 generations of Martinez women through wars, disasters, and heartbreak. She whispered a prayer in Spanish, the same words her abuela had taught her as a child, and prepared herself for whatever was coming. Outside her window, the lights of Denver grew brighter and brighter, rushing up to meet them with devastating inevitability. The Boeing 737 hit the runway at Denver International Airport with a bone-jarring thud that sent Katherine's teeth clicking together. Sparks flew past her window as the pilots fought to control their damaged aircraft, the scream of protesting brakes mixing with the wail of emergency sirens. Already converging on their position, Katherine remained hunched in her crash position until the plane finally ground to a halt, smoke billowing from what she could see of the landing gear. Around her, passengers were crying, some praying aloud in different languages, others sitting in stunned silence. The acrid smell of burning rubber and hot metal filled the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, remain seated." Captain Morrison's voice commanded over the intercom. "Emergency crews are approaching the aircraft. We will begin evacuation procedures momentarily." But Katherine wasn't looking toward the front of the plane. Her attention was focused on the man 3 rows behind her, who had been tapping throughout their descent. He was middle-aged, unremarkable in appearance, wearing a rumpled business suit. What made him interesting was the way his eyes kept darting toward the rear galley, and the fact that his tapping had continued even after they'd landed. Tap dash tap dash tap. Tap, tap dash tap. Katherine had learned Morse code during her Army service, though she'd never expected to use it on a commercial flight. The pattern was clear. Help trapped rear. Katherine. The woman beside her, Janet, a kindergarten teacher from Colorado Springs, grabbed her arm. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," Katherine replied automatically, though her mind was racing. She stood carefully, testing her balance. The plane was listing slightly to the right, suggesting significant damage to the landing gear on that side. Through the windows, she could see fire trucks and ambulances surrounding them, emergency personnel in reflective vests preparing for evacuation. Sarah Chen appeared at the front of the cabin, her professional smile intact despite the circumstances. "Everyone, please listen carefully. We're going to evacuate via the slides. Leave all carry-on baggage behind. When I give the signal, move quickly but don't run. Help others if you can, but don't stop for anything." As passengers began gathering in the aisles, Katherine made her decision. Instead of moving toward the front, she pushed against the flow of people, making her way toward the back of the plane. The businessman who'd been tapping was nowhere to be seen. "Ma'am, you need to move toward the exits," called a male flight attendant. His name tag read Marcus. "I'm a medic," Katherine said, which was true, even if not her current profession. Someone might be injured in the back. Marcus looked uncertain, but the evacuation was his priority. He nodded and continued ushering passengers forward. Katherine slipped past him into the rear galley area, where she immediately noticed what the tapping man had seen. One of the galley panels was askew, as if it had been forced open from inside. Behind the panel was a narrow maintenance space, barely large enough for a person. And inside that space, Katherine could make out a pair of legs. "Hey," she called softly, "are you okay?" A muffled voice responded, "Get me out of here, please." Katherine grabbed the panel and pulled. It was heavier than expected, the aircraft's rough landing having warped the frame. She braced her feet and pulled harder, finally managing to open it enough for the person inside to emerge. It was a young woman, maybe 25, wearing the uniform of airport maintenance crew. She was Hispanic with short black hair and intelligent dark eyes that were wide with fear. Her name tag read Maria Vasquez. She was clutching something against her chest, a small recording device. "Thank God," Maria gasped. "I thought I was going to die in there. The landing, I couldn't." "What are you doing in there?" Katherine interrupted. Around them, the cabin was nearly empty now, the last passengers disappearing through the forward exits. Maria looked around nervously. "I found something they didn't want me to find. They locked me in the maintenance compartment before takeoff, but I managed to record, 'Ladies, we need to evacuate now.'" Marcus had returned, his previous politeness replaced by urgency. "The plane isn't stable. We have maybe minutes before." The aircraft lurched suddenly, tilting further to the right. Through the windows, Katherine could see that one of the main landing gear struts had begun to collapse. Emergency foam was being sprayed on the runway beneath them. "Go, go, go!" Marcus shouted. The three of them ran toward the front of the plane. Maria stumbled, still shaken from her ordeal, and Katherine caught her arm. They reached the emergency slide just as the plane shifted again, this time with an ominous groaning sound that suggested structural failure. Katherine went first, tumbling down the inflatable slide and rolling away from the aircraft as she'd been trained. Maria followed, still clutching her recording device. Marcus came last, jumping just as the plane's right wing dipped toward the ground. Emergency personnel immediately surrounded them, checking for injuries and guiding them away from the aircraft. Katherine looked back to see Flight 447 listing. At a dangerous angle, fuel leaking from somewhere beneath the wing. The reality of how close they'd come to disaster was just beginning to sink in. Katherine Martinez? A paramedic was checking her pulse, shining a light in her eyes. Any pain? Difficulty breathing? "I'm fine," she said, though she accepted a blanket and a bottle of water. Her hands were shaking slightly delayed shock. She recognized. Around them, the 147 passengers and crew members from Flight 447 were being triaged, most suffering from nothing more than minor bumps and bruises. Considering what could have happened, it was miraculous, but Katherine's attention kept drifting to Maria Vasquez, who was being questioned by what appeared to be airport security officers. The young woman kept gesturing emphatically, pointing back toward the damaged aircraft, her recording device held protectively against her chest. "Katherine." She turned to find Janet, the teacher who'd been sitting beside her, wrapped in an emergency blanket and sporting a small bandage on her forehead. "I wanted to thank you," Janet said. "You were so calm during all of that. I don't know how I would have managed without someone steady nearby." "We all did fine," Katherine replied absently, still watching the interaction between Maria and the security officers. Something about their body language bothered her. They weren't acting like people investigating an accident. They were acting like people trying to control information. One of the officers, a tall man with graying hair and cold blue eyes, noticed Katherine watching. He said something to his companion, and both men looked in her direction. Katherine felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Denver evening air. "Excuse me, are you Katherine Martinez?" The gray-haired officer approached, badge displayed prominently on his jacket. "Agent Robert Hayes, Federal Air Marshal Service. I understand you were one of the last people off the aircraft?" "That's right. I'm a medic. I was checking to make sure no one needed help in the back." "And did you encounter anyone back there? Another passenger, perhaps?" Katherine hesitated. Every instinct told her that Maria Vasquez was in some kind of trouble, and that this Agent Hayes might be part of it. "No," she said finally. "Just the flight attendant helping with evacuation." Hayes studied her face carefully. "I see. Well, if you remember anything else, please let us know immediately. Here's my card." He handed her a business card that looked official enough, but something about it felt wrong. The typography was slightly off, the government seal not quite right. "Of course," Katherine said, pocketing the card. Hayes walked away, returning to where Maria was still being questioned. Katherine noticed that what had initially looked like questioning was starting to look more like detention. Maria was no longer holding her recording device, and her expression had shifted from fear to desperation. Katherine made another quick decision. She walked casually toward the terminal building, but instead of entering, she circled around through the chaos of emergency vehicles and personnel. Her military training served her well. She knew how to move without attracting attention, how to observe without being seen. She reached a position where she could overhear part of the conversation between Maria and the agents. "Told you, I was just doing routine maintenance. Device contained recordings of cockpit communications. Don't understand. I never..." National security implications. Katherine felt her blood run cold. Whatever Maria had recorded, it was significant enough that federal agents were involved. And if they were willing to detain her immediately after a near-catastrophic emergency, it was significant enough to be dangerous. She pulled out her phone and quickly took several photos of the agents, making sure to capture their faces and badge numbers. Then she began working her way back toward the terminal, her mind racing. Flight 447 hadn't suffered a simple mechanical failure. Maria Vasquez had discovered something, recorded something, that powerful people wanted suppressed. And now Katherine found herself caught in the middle of whatever conspiracy had just brought 149 people within minutes of death. As she entered the terminal, Katherine realized that her ordeal was just beginning. Outside, she could see news vans arriving, their satellite dishes extending toward the sky like mechanical flowers seeking sunlight. The official story of Flight 447 was about to be written, and she suspected it would bear little resemblance to the truth. She found a quiet corner and called her sister Elena in Phoenix. Elena was a federal prosecutor, someone who understood the system and could be trusted. "Katherine? Thank God, I just saw the news about your flight. Are you okay?" "I'm physically fine, but Elena, I think I've stumbled into something serious. I need your advice, and I need it to be completely confidential." "Of course. What's going on?" Katherine quickly explained about Maria Vasquez, the recording device, and the suspicious federal agents. Elena listened without interrupting, her prosecutorial instincts engaged. "Katie, you need to be very careful here. If federal agents are involved this quickly after the incident, there are probably national security issues at play. You could be putting yourself in real danger by getting involved." "But what if they're not really federal agents? What if Maria discovered something that someone with power wants covered up? Elena, people could have died today. 149 people. And if it wasn't an accident, then you need to let the proper authorities handle it. Real authorities. Let me make some calls, see what I can find out about this Agent Hayes and his partner. In the meantime, keep your head down and don't do anything heroic." But Katherine was already formulating a plan. She had Maria's last name and knew she worked at Denver International Airport. Finding her shouldn't be too difficult, assuming she wasn't already in federal custody. "Elena, I'll be careful, but I can't just walk away from this." "I know you can't. It's who you are. Just promise me you'll stay in touch. And if things get dangerous, call me immediately. I have contacts in federal law enforcement who can help if needed." After ending the call, Katherine made her way to the airport's customer service area, where she learned that all passengers from Flight 447 were being put up in nearby hotels while the investigation proceeded. She accepted the voucher for the Marriott, but had no intention of going there immediately. Instead, she found an airport directory and located the maintenance facilities. It was after 8 p.m. now, and the administrative areas would be largely empty. But maintenance was a 24-hour operation, and someone would know Maria Vasquez. Katherine changed out of her business attire in a restroom, putting on jeans and a sweater from her carry-on bag. The casual clothes would help her blend in better. She also pulled her long black hair back into a ponytail and swapped her heels for comfortable walking shoes. The maintenance area was located in a section of the airport most passengers never saw. A maze of concrete corridors, equipment rooms, and workshops that kept the complex operation of DIA functioning around the clock. Katherine approached a security checkpoint, where a bored-looking guard barely glanced at her emergency passenger tag before waving her through. She found the electrical maintenance shop after 20 minutes of searching. Inside, 3 technicians were working on various pieces of equipment. One of them, a woman in her 50s with graying hair and calloused hands, looked up as Katherine entered. "You lost, honey? I'm looking for information about Maria Vasquez. She works in maintenance here." The woman's expression immediately became guarded. "Who's asking?" "My name is Katherine Martinez. I was on Flight 447 tonight. Maria helped me during the evacuation, and I wanted to make sure she was okay." "Maria didn't help with any evacuation," one of the male technicians said, looking up from a circuit board he was repairing. "She was supposed to be doing routine maintenance on aircraft systems today, but she never checked back in after her morning assignment. Katherine felt pieces of a puzzle beginning to click together. What kind of maintenance was she doing? Communication systems, the woman replied. Maria's our best tech for avionics and flight data systems. She can troubleshoot anything electronic. On an aircraft. She paused, studying Katherine more carefully. You said you were on 447. The emergency landing? That's right. And I think Maria discovered something about that plane before it took off. Something that someone wanted to keep quiet. The three technicians exchanged glances. Finally, the older woman made a decision. Come with me, she said, leading Katherine to a small break room adjacent to the workshop. My name's Betty Gonzalez. I've been working airport maintenance for 23 years, and I've never seen anything like what happened today. What do you mean? Maria came in this morning, all excited about a new assignment. Said she'd been asked to do a special inspection on a Boeing 737 that was scheduled for an early flight to Seattle. Flight 447, as it turns out. Katherine felt her pulse quicken. Who gave her the assignment? That's just it, nobody knows. The work order came through official channels, signed by a supervisor who claims he never authorized it. Maria spent about 3 hours on that plane this morning, and when she came back, she was different, scared. She tried to call someone, kept saying she had proof of something. Proof of what? Betty shook her head. She wouldn't say. Just kept muttering about how they were going to kill people and make it look like an accident. Then around noon, these guys in suits showed up asking for her. Official-looking types with badges and serious expressions. Federal agents? Maybe. Or maybe people who wanted to look like federal agents. Either way, Maria saw them coming and disappeared. Next thing we know, Flight 447 is making an emergency landing, and Maria's nowhere to be found. Katherine absorbed this information, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Maria had discovered something during her inspection of the aircraft that had put both of them in danger. And now Maria was missing, possibly detained by people who might not be who they claimed to be. Betty, does Maria have any family in the area? Close friends? Somewhere she might go if she was in trouble. Her younger brother Miguel works here too, in baggage handling. Their close came up from El Salvador together about 5 years ago. Good kids, hard workers. Miguel's probably scared out of his mind right now. Where can I find him? Betty glanced at her watch. He'd be on the late shift, Terminal A baggage area. But listen, honey, if Maria's mixed up in something dangerous, you don't want to get involved. These kinds of things, they have a way of swallowing up innocent people. But Katherine was already moving toward the door. She'd been given a glimpse behind the curtain of something much larger than a simple aviation accident, and every instinct told her that Maria Vasquez was the key to understanding what had really happened to Flight 447. As she made her way through the airport's service corridors toward Terminal A, Katherine thought about the recording device Maria had been clutching. Whatever was on that device, it was worth imprisoning someone over, worth potentially killing 149 people to cover up. She thought about the grinding sounds during their flight, the precise timing of the electrical failure, the suspicious federal agents who'd appeared with impossible speed. This was starting to look less like an accident and more like attempted mass murder designed to eliminate a single witness. The question now was whether Katherine could find Maria and uncover the truth before whoever was behind this decided that she too had become a liability. Behind her, unknown to Katherine, Agent Hayes was making a phone call from his position outside the maintenance facility. She's asking questions, he reported. The Martinez woman. She's connected with the Vasquez girl somehow, and she's not going to let this go. The voice on the other end of the line was calm, professional. Then we'll have to accelerate our timeline. Bring them both in. Tonight. What about the recording? We recovered it from Vasquez, but there may be copies. We need to be certain. Hayes nodded, though the person on the phone couldn't see him. Understood. What about the flight crew? The pilots don't know anything. Their instruments showed genuine malfunctions. But Chen, the head flight attendant, is asking too many questions. About the passenger manifest, she needs to be handled as well. This is getting messy. It was messy from the moment Vasquez accessed that maintenance compartment. Now we're in damage control mode. Clean it up, Hayes, all of it. The line went dead, and Hayes pocketed his phone. He signaled to his partner, who was waiting in their unmarked sedan. It was going to be a long night, but by morning, the official story of Flight 447 would be the only story that mattered. In the distance, he could see Katherine Martinez's figure disappearing into Terminal A. She had no idea that her decision to help Maria Vasquez had just made her a target of one of the most ruthlessly efficient cover-up operations in the federal government. The hunt was on. Terminal at Denver International Airport hummed with late-night activity. A more subdued energy than the daytime chaos, but busy enough that Katherine could move through the baggage handling areas without attracting much attention. She'd learned during her military service that confidence and purpose were often more effective than official credentials. If you looked like you belonged somewhere, most people assumed you did. The baggage handling operation was located beneath the main terminal, a maze of conveyor belts, sorting systems, and loading docks that processed thousands of pieces of luggage daily. Katherine followed the signs toward the international arrivals section, where Betty had said Miguel Vasquez would be working. She found him loading bags from a Lufthansa flight, a young man in his early 20s with the same intelligent dark eyes as his sister. He was smaller than Katherine had expected, wiry rather than muscular, but he moved with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing physical labor for years. Miguel Vasquez? She called over the noise of machinery. He looked up, immediately wary. In Katherine's experience, that level of instant caution meant someone who'd learned to be careful about unexpected visitors. Who wants to know? My name is Katherine Martinez. I was on Flight 447 tonight. I met your sister during the evacuation. Miguel's expression shifted to alarm. Maria was on that flight? But she was supposed to be working maintenance today. Is she okay? Was she hurt? Katherine realized he hadn't heard about his sister's involvement yet. She wasn't a passenger, Miguel. She was hiding in the aircraft's maintenance compartment. Someone had locked her in there, and she had some kind of recording device with her. Federal agents took her for questioning after we landed. Miguel stopped loading bags entirely now, his face going pale. Recording device? What kind of recording? I don't know, but it seemed important. Important enough that people were willing to risk killing everyone on that plane to cover it up. You think the emergency wasn't an accident? Katherine looked around, making sure they weren't being overheard. The other baggage handlers were focused on their own work, but she lowered her voice anyway. Miguel, your sister discovered something during a maintenance inspection this morning. Something that scared her enough to hide and record evidence. Then our plane suffered multiple system failures that could have killed us all. The agents who took Maria for questioning. I'm not sure they were legitimate federal agents. Miguel stared at her for a long moment, then made a decision. Come with me. He led her to a small break room adjacent to the baggage sorting area, checking to make sure they were alone before closing the door. Maria called me this afternoon, he said quietly. She was terrified. Said she'd found something on one of the aircraft she was inspecting, something about the navigation and communication systems that didn't make sense. She said it looked like someone had installed equipment that could override the pilot's controls. Katherine felt her blood run cold. Override the controls? You mean like take control of the plane remotely? That's what she thought. Maria's good with electronics, really good. She said the equipment was sophisticated, professional grade, but it wasn't supposed to be there. When she tried to report it through normal channels, her supervisor claimed No knowledge of her assignment. That's when she realized something was seriously wrong. So she recorded evidence. She recorded everything: the unauthorized equipment, the serial numbers, the wiring modifications. She was planning to take it to the FAA or maybe the FBI. But before she could, these men in suits showed up asking for her. Katherine processed this information, pieces of a larger picture beginning to emerge. Someone had installed remote override equipment on Flight 447, intending to use it to crash the plane. But Maria's discovery had forced them to activate it prematurely, while she was still aboard, hidden in the maintenance compartment. Miguel, do you know where Maria might have hidden backup copies of her recording? Or who else she might have contacted? He shook his head. She was always careful about digital security. Said it came from growing up in a country where the government monitored everything. She probably encrypted the files and stored them in multiple locations. What about friends? Someone she trusted? There's Sarah Chen, one of the flight attendants. Maria does some side work for the airline, and she and Sarah became friends. Sarah's the only person Maria really trusted here besides me. Katherine remembered Sarah, the professional flight attendant who'd managed the evacuation so calmly. If Maria had confided in anyone about her discovery, it would make sense for it to be Sarah. Do you have Sarah's contact information? Miguel pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. Here's her number. But Katherine, if you're right about what happened tonight, then everyone who knows about this is in danger, including you. Katherine accepted the contact information, but she was already thinking beyond the immediate danger. If someone had the capability to remotely control commercial aircraft, Flight 447 might not have been their first attempt, and it certainly wouldn't be their last. Miguel, I need you to be very careful. Don't go home tonight. Don't follow your normal routine. If these people are willing to crash a plane to cover their tracks, they won't hesitate to go after Maria's family. His face grew even more serious. What about Maria? Where is she now? I don't know. The agents who took her claimed to be federal marshals, but something didn't feel right about them. We need to. Katherine's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Elena's number appeared on the screen. Excuse me, I need to take this. Katherine stepped away, accepting the call. Elena? Katie, I've been making calls about those agents you mentioned. I can't find any record of a Robert Hayes working for the Federal Air Marshal Service. And the badge numbers you sent me in those photos don't match any currently issued federal law enforcement credentials. Katherine felt a chill of confirmation. So they're not real agents? Either they're not real, or they're operating under deep cover with credentials that aren't in any system I can access. Either way, that's extremely concerning. Where are you? Now? Still at the airport, trying to piece together what happened. Katie, you need to get out of there. If these people are willing to impersonate federal agents, they're playing for very high stakes. Come to Phoenix, stay with me until we can figure out what's really going on. But Katherine was watching Miguel through the break room window, seeing the fear and desperation in his expression as he waited to learn his sister's fate. She couldn't just abandon him, and she couldn't walk away from whatever conspiracy had nearly killed 149 people tonight. Elena, I can't leave yet. Maria Vasquez, the woman who discovered the evidence, she's missing, possibly kidnapped by these fake agents. Her brother is here, and there's a flight attendant who might know more about what Maria found. Katie, I know it's dangerous, but if I'm right, if someone has the ability to remotely control commercial aircraft, then hundreds of thousands of people are at risk. This goes way beyond what happened to Flight 447. Elena was quiet for a moment. All right, but you're not doing this alone. I'm getting on the next flight to Denver, and I'm bringing some people with me, real federal agents, people I trust. Can you stay safe until morning? I think so. The airport is public, lots of security, cameras and witnesses. They can't just make people disappear here. Don't be so sure about that. Large airports are actually perfect places for people to disappear. So much transient traffic, so many restricted areas, so many ways to move someone without being noticed. Katherine looked around the baggage handling area, suddenly aware of how isolated they were down here. Point taken. I'll be careful. Stay in public areas, stay around other people, and call me every hour. If I don't hear from you, I'm calling in every favor I have with federal law enforcement. After ending the call, Katherine returned to Miguel, who was pacing anxiously in the small break room. We need to contact Sarah Chen, she told him. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe. Do you have somewhere you can go? Friends outside of Denver, maybe? I have a cousin in Colorado Springs, but I can't leave while Maria is missing. Miguel, the best thing you can do for Maria right now is stay alive and stay free. If these people grab you too, then no one will be left to tell her story. He considered this, then nodded reluctantly. What about you? I'm going to find Sarah and see what else I can learn about what Maria discovered, but I need to know you're safe first. They left the break room together, but as they walked through the baggage handling area, Katherine noticed something that made her blood run cold. Two men in dark suits were talking to one of the supervisors, showing badges and gesturing in their direction. Miguel, she whispered urgently, don't look back, but we're being followed. Is there another way out of here? He glanced casually over his shoulder, then grabbed her arm. This way. There's a service tunnel that connects to the main terminal. They moved quickly through the maze of conveyor belts and sorting equipment, Katherine hoping they looked like employees going about their normal business. But she could hear footsteps behind them, getting closer. The service tunnel Miguel led her to was narrow and poorly lit, clearly intended for maintenance access rather than regular foot traffic. They moved as quickly as they dared in the dim light, Katherine's heart pounding as she listened for sounds of pursuit. There, Miguel pointed to a metal door ahead of them. That leads to Terminal B, near the food court. Lots of people, even at this time of night. But as they approached the door, Katherine heard the distinct sound of it being opened from the other side. They were trapped between two groups of pursuers. Back, she whispered. There has to be another way. They retreated into the tunnel. But the footsteps behind them were getting closer. Katherine looked around desperately, her military training kicking in. In a situation like this, the key was to break the pattern, do something unexpected that would give them an advantage. She spotted a maintenance ladder, leading up to what appeared to be an access hatch in the tunnel ceiling. Up there, she told. Miguel, can you get that hatch open? He climbed quickly, his experience with airport maintenance systems serving him well. The hatch opened onto a narrow crawl space that ran parallel to the main terminal corridors above. They pulled themselves up just as the two groups of pursuers converged on their position in the tunnel below. Katherine heard Agent Hayes' voice clearly. They were just here. Search every service area, every maintenance room. They can't have gone far. In the cram space above, Katherine and Miguel moved as quietly as possible, following what appeared to be an electrical conduit toward the main terminal. The space was cramped and filled with pipes and ductwork, but it offered concealment and multiple exit points. After 20 minutes of careful movement, they reached another access hatch that opened into a janitor's closet in Terminal B. Katherine listened carefully before opening it, hearing only the distant sounds of late-night airport activity. They emerged into the closet, brushed dust and dirt from their clothes, and opened the door to find themselves near the food court Miguel had mentioned. Even at nearly midnight, there were dozens of people around delayed passengers, airport employees, and the general mix of travelers that made large airports never truly quiet. Call your cousin, Katherine told Miguel. Tell him you're coming for an unexpected visit, and don't give any details over the phone. Take a cab, not your own car, and pay cash. Don't use credit cards for anything. What about Sarah Chen? Katherine checked her phone. I'll call her. Try to arrange a meeting. Somewhere safe. Miguel, once you get to Colorado Springs, don't contact anyone from Denver except through a secure method. Elena, my sister, the prosecutor, should be here tomorrow with help. Federal agents we can actually trust. Miguel nodded, then surprised her with a quick hug. Find my sister, please. She's all the family I have left. I will, Katherine promised, hoping it was a promise she could keep. As Miguel disappeared into the crowd of travelers, Katherine found a quiet corner and called Sarah Chen's number. It went to voicemail after several rings. Sarah, this is Katherine. Martinez from Flight 447. I was sitting in 8A tonight. I need to speak with you urgently about Maria Vasquez and what she discovered during her maintenance inspection of our aircraft. It's not safe to discuss this over the phone, but it's about the real reason our flight nearly crashed. Please call me back as soon as possible. She hung up and looked around the terminal, suddenly feeling very alone and very exposed. Elena wouldn't arrive until morning. Miguel was on his way to safety, and Maria was in the hands of people who might not be legitimate federal agents. Katherine decided to find a more secure location to wait for Sarah's return call. The 24-hour business center in Terminal B offered private booths with internet access, and the location provided good visibility of anyone approaching while offering multiple exit routes. She was settling into one of the booths when her phone rang. Sarah Chen's name appeared on the screen. Katherine? I just got your message. What's this about Maria? Sarah, are you somewhere safe where you can talk freely? I'm at home, but... Katherine, what's going on? The airline briefed us on the incident. Said it was hydraulic failure and electrical problems. Standard mechanical issues. It wasn't standard anything. Sarah, Maria discovered that someone had installed unauthorized equipment on our aircraft. Equipment that could override pilot controls. She recorded evidence, and now she's been taken by people claiming to be federal agents. There was a long pause. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was much more serious. Where are you now? Still at the airport. Sarah, Miguel said Maria trusted. Did she share anything with you about what she found? Not directly, but, Katherine, can you meet me somewhere? This isn't something I want to discuss over the phone. Where? Do you know the Chapel of Peace in the main terminal? It's usually empty at this time of night, and it's public but private. I can be there in 30 minutes. I'll be there. Katherine made her way through the airport to the Interfaith Chapel, a small, quiet space designed for travelers who needed a moment of spiritual reflection. At this hour, it was indeed empty, softly lit, and peaceful in contrast to the bustling terminal outside. She didn't have to wait long. Sarah Chen appeared 15 minutes later, no longer in her flight attendant uniform, but wearing jeans and a Denver Broncos sweatshirt. She looked around carefully before entering the chapel. Katherine, before we talk, I need to know, are you absolutely certain about what you're telling me? About the equipment Maria found. I'm certain she found something that scared her badly enough to hide in an aircraft maintenance compartment. I'm certain the people who took her aren't legitimate federal agents. And I'm certain that what happened to our flight tonight wasn't a coincidence. Sarah sat down in one of the pews, her expression troubled. Maria did contact me. Not directly about the equipment, but she called me yesterday asking about passenger manifests for certain flights. She wanted to know if there was a pattern to specific routes or specific passengers. What kind of pattern? She was particularly interested in flights that had experienced unexplained mechanical failures in the past 6 months. Katherine, there have been more incidents than usual planes having to make emergency landings due to navigation failures, communication blackouts, hydraulic problems. The incidents were all attributed to different causes, but Maria thought she saw a pattern. Katherine felt pieces of the puzzle clicking together. Someone's been testing the override system. Flight 447 wasn't the first time they've used it. That's what Maria suspected. She said the equipment she found was sophisticated, military grade, and it was installed by someone with intimate knowledge of Boeing 737 systems. Did she say anything else? Any idea who might be behind it? Sarah hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Maria had a theory, but it seemed so far-fetched that I didn't take it seriously. She thought it might be connected to a private military contractor that does work for the government. Something about testing whether they could disable or control aircraft remotely as part of some kind of defense or intelligence operation. Testing on civilian aircraft? With passengers aboard? That's what made it seem so unbelievable. But Maria said she'd traced some of the equipment's serial numbers, and they led back to a company called Blackwater Aviation Services. Katherine had heard of Blackwater, or rather, the various companies that had emerged from the original private military contractor after it had been reorganized and renamed multiple times. If they were involved, this was much bigger than she'd imagined. Sarah, do you still have the information Maria shared with you? Some of it. I have a list of the flights she was researching, and copies of some of the technical documentation she found. But Katherine, if she's right about who's behind this, then we're dealing with people who have virtually unlimited resources and government connections. Which is why we need to get this information to the right people. My sister is a federal prosecutor, and she's bringing legitimate federal agents to Denver tomorrow. People we can trust. Sarah nodded slowly. There's something else. Maria wasn't the only maintenance worker who noticed unusual modifications to aircraft. She had a contact at Phoenix Sky Harbor who found similar equipment on planes there. And someone at LAX who reported strange electrical work being done during routine maintenance. This is happening nationwide? Possibly. Maria was trying to coordinate with these other technicians, trying to build a comprehensive picture of what was being installed and where. Katherine's phone buzzed with a text message from Elena. Flight delayed. Won't arrive until 6 a.m. Stay safe. She showed the message to Sarah. We have several more hours to wait for backup. What do you think we should do? I think we should get out of this airport, Sarah said immediately. If these people are as dangerous as we think they are, staying here is giving them home field advantage. They know every corner of this place, every security camera, every way to move people without being seen. Katherine had been thinking the same thing. Do you have somewhere we could go? Somewhere they wouldn't expect? I have a friend who lives in Boulder, about an hour from here. Emma's a pilot for a charter service, and she has a private hangar where she works on aircraft restorations. It's isolated but secure, and Emma's someone we can trust. Can you contact her? Sarah was already pulling out her phone. Emma? It's Sarah Chen. I'm sorry to call so late, but I have an emergency situation. Yes, it's serious. Can my friend and I come up there tonight? We need somewhere safe to wait until morning. Thank you, I owe you big time. She ended the call and looked at Katherine. Emma says come ahead. She'll meet us at the hangar. But Katherine, we need to be very careful getting out of here. If those agents are still looking for us, they'll be watching all the obvious exits. What about your car? It's in the employee lot, but they might be watching it. Let me call a cab to pick us up at the rental car return area. That's busy enough that we can blend in with other travelers. As they prepared to leave the chapel, Katherine's military training kicked in again. Sarah, when we leave here, we split up. Take different routes to the rental car area, and don't arrive at the same time. If one of us gets grabbed, the other can still get away. Are you sure that's necessary? Look, I hope I'm being paranoid. But Flight 447 was meant to crash tonight with everyone aboard. That tells me these people are willing to commit mass murder to protect their operation. So yes, I think precautions are necessary. They left the chapel separately. Sarah heading toward the escalators while Katherine took a more circuitous route through the shopping areas. She kept her head down and moved with purpose. Just another tired traveler trying to get somewhere. She was halfway to the rental car area when she spotted Agent Hayes near one of the security checkpoints, talking intently on his phone. Katherine quickly ducked into a bookstore, using the magazine racks to shield herself while she observed him. Hayes was clearly frustrated, gesturing sharply as he spoke. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but his body language suggested that his superiors were not happy with how the evening was progressing. When he ended the call, he looked around the terminal with the systematic attention of someone trained in surveillance. Katherine waited until he moved away from her route, then continued toward the rental car area. She spotted Sarah already there, apparently studying arrival and departure information on one of the monitors. A few minutes later, a yellow cab pulled up to the pickup area. They got into the cab separately, Sarah in front and Katherine in back, giving the driver the address for the hangar in Boulder. As they pulled away from the airport, Katherine finally allowed herself to breathe normally for the first time in hours, but her relief was short-lived. As they merged onto Highway 36 heading toward Boulder, Katherine noticed a pair of headlights in the side mirror that had been behind them since they left the airport. The car was maintaining a consistent distance, not passing despite opportunities to do so. "Sarah," she said quietly, "I think we're being followed." Sarah glanced in her mirror. "The dark sedan? That's the one." The cab driver, an elderly man with a thick accent, looked at them in his rearview mirror. "You ladies in some kind of trouble?" Katherine made a quick decision. "Yes, we are." "Can you lose that car behind us?" The driver grinned. "Lady, I've been driving cab in Denver for 30 years. I know every back road between here and Boulder." "Hold on." He took the next exit, heading into a maze of suburban streets that Katherine couldn't follow on her mental map. Behind them, the sedan followed, confirming their suspicions. "Professional driver," the cabbie observed, watching his mirrors. "Knows how to tail without being obvious about it." He made a series of quick turns through a residential neighborhood, then doubled back toward a shopping center that was closed for the night. The sedan stayed with them, but the driver's maneuvers had forced their pursuer to reveal themselves more clearly. "There," Sarah pointed. "Can you see the license plate?" Katherine squinted in the darkness. "Government plates, federal." "Or fake federal," Sarah corrected. The cab driver pulled into the parking lot behind the shopping center, driving through the loading dock area and emerging onto a parallel street. The maneuver forced the sedan to choose between following them openly or losing them entirely. The sedan chose to follow, pulling into the same lot just as they emerged onto the parallel street. "Definitely tailing us," the driver confirmed. "Where exactly in Boulder do you need to go?" Sarah gave him the address, and he nodded. "I can get you there, but these guys are going to follow us all the way. Is that what you want?" Katherine thought. Quickly, "Is there anywhere along the route with good security cameras and witnesses? Somewhere public where they couldn't try anything." "There's a 24-hour truck stop about halfway there. Always busy, well-lit, security cameras everywhere." "Perfect. Drop us there, and we'll call another cab for the rest of the trip." The next 20 minutes were a tense game of cat and mouse through the Denver suburbs. Their cab driver proved to be as skilled as he'd claimed, using his knowledge of local roads to maintain their lead while confirming that they were definitely being pursued. When they reached the truck stop, Katherine could see why he'd suggested it. The facility was brightly lit and busy despite the late hour, with dozens of trucks and cars in the parking area. Security cameras were visible on light poles throughout the lot. "This is as safe as it gets," the driver said. "You want me to wait while you call another cab?" "No, but thank you for everything." Katherine paid him in cash and added a substantial tip. "You may have saved our lives tonight." As their cab pulled away, The sedan that had been following them drove slowly through the parking lot, the occupants clearly looking for Katherine and Sarah, but the two women had already moved inside the truck stop restaurant, positioning themselves at a table where they could watch the parking lot while staying out of sight. "Emma's going to meet us here instead," Sarah reported, ending a call on her phone. "She's about 20 minutes away." Katherine watched the sedan make another pass through the parking lot, then park at the far end where the occupants could monitor the entrance. "They're not giving up. Should we call the police?" Katherine considered this. "And tell them what?" "That we think federal agents are following us." "But we think they're fake federal agents?" "Sarah, if these people have the resources to install remote override equipment on commercial aircraft, they probably have the connections to make local police believe whatever story they want to tell. So what do? We wait for Emma, and we hope she has ideas about how to get out of here without those guys following us." 20 minutes later, Emma Reeves proved to be exactly what they needed. She was a woman in her 40s with short blonde hair, wearing a leather jacket and jeans, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to being in control of complex situations. "Sarah told me you're in some kind of federal trouble," she said without preamble as she joined them at their table. "Something about aircraft sabotage?" Katherine quickly explained the situation while Emma listened with the focused attention of a professional pilot. "Okay," Emma said when Katherine finished. "First thing, those guys in the sedan are definitely not legitimate federal agents. I know what real federal aviation investigators look like, and those guys aren't it. Second, if someone's installing override equipment on commercial aircraft, that's not just terrorism. It's something that threatens every pilot and passenger in the country. Can you help us get out of here?" Emma smiled grimly. "I didn't drive here, I flew. My helicopter's on the roof of the shopping center across the street. Can either of you handle a short flight in a small aircraft?" Katherine felt a surge of hope. "That's perfect. They can't follow a helicopter. The hangar's only 15 minutes by air, and it's equipped with everything we need for a secure communication setup. We can contact the FAA, the FBI, whoever you need to reach." They left the truck stop through the back entrance, moving quickly across the street to the shopping center. Emma's helicopter was a small Robinson R-44, the kind used for pilot training and short-range transportation. As they lifted off into the night sky, Katherine could see the sedan still parked at the truck stop, its occupants probably wondering where their targets had gone. "Boulders just ahead," Emma called over the noise of the rotors. "And Katherine, once we get to the hangar, I want to hear every detail about what happened tonight. If someone's testing remote override systems on passenger aircraft, there are people in the aviation community who need to know about it immediately." Looking down at the lights of the Denver metro area spreading out below them, Katherine realized that Flight 447 had been just the beginning. Whatever conspiracy they'd stumbled into, it was bigger than a single aircraft, bigger than a single incident, and tomorrow, when Elena arrived with her federal contacts, Katherine was going to make sure that the right people finally learned the truth about what was happening to America's commercial aviation system. Emma's hangar sat on the edge of Boulder Municipal Airport, a modest facility that served private aircraft and flight training operations. The building was larger than Katherine had expected, with enough space for several small planes and a well-equipped workshop area. "Welcome to my second home," Emma said as she unlocked the hangar doors. "I restore vintage aircraft as a hobby, and I've got communication equipment that'll let us reach anyone we need to contact." Inside, Katherine could see two aircraft in various stages of restoration, a 1940s-era Piper Cub and what looked like a Korean War-era training plane. But more importantly, one corner of the hangar had been converted into an office area with multiple computers, radio equipment, and communication systems. "Pilot's paradise," Sarah observed. "How long have you been doing this?" 20 years as a commercial pilot, 10 years building this place." After 9/11s, I decided I wanted a backup plan if the airline industry collapsed. Turns out it was good preparation for a lot of things. Emma powered up her communication systems while Katherine called Elena to update her on their location. "Thank God you're somewhere safe," Elena said when Katherine explained where they were. "Katie, I've been doing more research on this Blackwater Aviation Services that you mentioned. The company exists, but it's buried under several layers of holding companies and government contracts. What I could find suggests they do classified work for multiple federal agencies. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel." "What kind of classified work?" "That's what's concerning. There's almost no public information. But I did find some budget line items that suggest they're involved in what's called aviation security research. Could be legitimate anti-terrorism work, or it could be exactly what you think it is." Katherine put the call on speaker so Sarah and Emma could hear. "Elena, this is Sarah Chen, the flight attendant from Flight 447, Maria Vasquez, told me she'd traced equipment serial numbers back to Blackwater. If they're doing legitimate security research, why are they testing it on passenger flights without telling anyone?" "That's the question that's going to get people in Washington very interested," Elena replied. "Katie, I'm still planning to arrive at 6 a.m. with some federal contacts. Can you stay put until then? We should be safe here." "Elena, one more thing. Agent Hayes and his partner were definitely not legitimate federal marshals. Their credentials don't check out." "I know. I've been making calls all night, and there's no record of them in any federal database. Which means either they're operating under the deepest possible cover, or they're working for someone who has access to very convincing fake credentials." After ending the call, Emma turned from her computer setup with a grim expression. "I've been monitoring federal aviation frequencies while you were talking," she said. "There's unusual radio traffic. Tonight, multiple federal agencies coordinating some kind of operation centered on Denver International Airport." "What kind of operation?" Katherine asked. "Search and containment. They're looking for specific individuals, and they're treating it as a matter of national security." Sarah and Katherine exchanged glances. "They're looking for us," Sarah said. "Probably. But here's what's interesting. The operation involves not just the Air Marshal Service, but also DIATF, and something called Task Force Raven, which I've never heard of." Katherine felt a chill. Elena said Blackwater does work for multiple federal agencies. What if they have people embedded in those agencies? What if the fake Agent Hayes isn't just impersonating a federal marshal? What if he's being backed up by real federal agents who think they're working a legitimate case? Emma nodded slowly. "That would explain the level of coordination. Someone with high-level access has convinced multiple agencies that you two are terrorists or foreign agents, or something equally serious. Which means we can't trust anyone in federal law enforcement until we know who's really running this operation." Sarah concluded. Katherine was about to respond when Emma's radio crackled with an urgent transmission. "All units, be advised that suspects Katherine Martinez and Sarah Chen are considered armed and extremely dangerous. They are wanted in connection with an act of aviation terrorism. Approach with maximum caution and do not attempt apprehension without backup." The three women stared at each other in shock. "Armed and extremely dangerous?" Katherine said. "Aviation terrorism? They're setting us up." Emma quickly tuned to other frequencies, picking up additional transmissions. The scope of the manhunt was becoming clear. Roadblocks were being established on highways leading out of the Denver area, and federal agents were coordinating with local law enforcement across Colorado. "This is a full-scale federal fugitive operation," Emma said. "Whoever's behind this has serious pull." Sarah was pacing now, her flight attendant training in crisis management evident as she processed the situation. "They're not just trying to silence us. They're trying to discredit us completely. Even if we eventually prove our innocence, who's going to believe that a suspected terrorist uncovered a real conspiracy? Katherine's phone rang. Elena's number appeared on the screen. "Katie, don't say anything specific about where you are," Elena said immediately. "My flight has been grounded in Phoenix. Federal marshals just removed me from the aircraft, claiming I'm part of a terrorism investigation. They've confiscated my phone and laptop." Katherine felt the world spinning around her. "Elena, are you okay? Where are you now?" "I'm fine, but I'm being held for questioning." "Katie, they know about our phone calls tonight. They know I was bringing federal contacts to help you. Someone with access to real-time communication intercepts is feeding information to whoever's running this operation. What should we do? Assume all your communications are being monitored. Trust no one in federal law enforcement until we can. Sort out who's legitimate and who's not. And Katie, find somewhere to hide where they can't use electronic surveillance to track you." The line went dead. Katherine looked at Sarah and Emma, feeling the weight of their isolation. Elena had been their connection to legitimate law enforcement, their hope for getting the truth to people who could act on it. Now she was in custody, and they were officially wanted fugitives. "Electronic surveillance," Emma said thoughtfully. "That includes cell phone tracking. You need to get rid of your phones. But how will Elena contact us when she gets free?" "She won't. We're on our own until we can find another way to get the truth out." Sarah was studying one of Emma's computers. "What about the media? If we can't trust the government, what about going public with what we know? The media will want proof." Katherine replied. "And most of our proof is in the hands of people who are either missing or in federal custody." Emma had an idea. "What about the other maintenance workers Maria was in contact with? The ones in Phoenix and Los Angeles who found similar equipment. Miguel mentioned them, but I don't have their contact information. I might be able to help with that." Emma turned to her computer and began typing. "The aviation maintenance community is pretty tight-knit. If these workers reported unusual modifications through official channels, there might be records I can access." While Emma worked, Katherine and Sarah destroyed their cell phones, removing the batteries and SIM cards. It felt like cutting their last link to the outside world, but they couldn't risk being tracked. "Here's something," Emma announced. "Phoenix Sky Harbor had a report filed 3 weeks ago about unauthorized electrical modifications found on a Southwest Airlines 737. The report was filed by a maintenance technician named Carlos Mendoza, but it was apparently dismissed as a paperwork error." "What about lax?" "Similar report, filed by someone named Jennifer Walsh at American Airlines, also dismissed." Katherine felt pieces of the puzzle coming together. 3 major airports, 3 different airlines, but the same type of unauthorized modifications. "Emma, can you get contact information for these technicians?" "I can try, but it'll take some time to access personnel databases." While Emma worked on tracking down the other maintenance workers, Sarah discovered something troubling on the radio frequencies. "They're expanding the search," she reported. "I'm hearing references to Boulder Municipal Airport. They know we came here." Emma looked up from her computer. "How could they know that?" "The cab driver," Katherine realized. "Or maybe someone at the truck stop recognized us. Or," she paused, struck by a more disturbing thought. "What if they tracked Emma's helicopter? That's possible. All aircraft have transponders that broadcast location and altitude if they're monitoring aviation traffic. Then we need to leave, now." Emma was already moving toward the other end of the hangar. "I've got a 1965 Cessna 172 that's not registered in my name. It was a restoration project I bought from an estate sale, and I never got around to updating the paperwork. No electronic systems, no transponder, and it's not connected to me in any database. Can it get us out of Colorado?" "It's got a range of about 600 miles. We could reach Utah, Wyoming, or New Mexico on a full tank. Sarah was listening to the radio frequencies. Federal units are setting up a perimeter around the airport. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they arrive. Emma was already preflighting the Cessna, checking fuel levels and control surfaces with practiced efficiency. Get in. We'll figure out where we're going once we're airborne. Katherine hesitated. Emma, you don't have to do this. You're not part of whatever conspiracy this is. You could stay here. Tell them you never saw us. Emma paused in her preflight. Check. Katherine, if someone's installing remote override equipment on commercial aircraft, every pilot in the country is at risk. My friends, my colleagues, thousands of innocent passengers, they're all potential victims. This isn't just your fight anymore. They climbed into the small aircraft, just as they heard the sound of vehicles approaching the hangar. Emma started the engine, and they taxied quickly toward the runway, using the airport's perimeter road to avoid the main taxiway where approaching federal vehicles might spot them. Boulder Tower, this is Cessna November 784 Charlie requesting immediate departure, Emma called on the radio. Cessna 84 Charlie, Boulder Tower. You are not on our departure schedule. Please taxi to the ramp for identification. Emma looked at Katherine and Sarah. Hold on. She pushed the throttle forward and accelerated down the runway without clearance, lifting off just as federal vehicles arrived at the airport's main terminal. Katherine looked back to see cars and trucks spreading out across the airport property, their searchlights sweeping the areas where fugitives might hide. Where are we going? Sarah asked as they climbed into the night sky. Emma checked her navigation charts. New Mexico. I have a friend who runs a small charter operation out of Santa Fe, someone who asks no questions and has resources we might need. Katherine watched the lights of Boulder disappear behind them, feeling like they were crossing a line from which there might be no return. They were now officially fugitives from federal law enforcement, flying an unregistered aircraft toward an uncertain destination, but they were also the only people left who knew the truth about Flight 447 and the conspiracy that had nearly killed 149 innocent people. Maria Vasquez was missing, Miguel was in hiding, Elena was in federal custody, and the evidence they'd gathered was either destroyed or in the wrong hands. Emma, Katherine said, your friend in Santa Fe, can we trust them? With my life. Jake. Morrison was my flight instructor 20 years ago, and he's one of the most ethical people I know. If anyone can help us figure out how to get the truth out, it's him. Sarah was monitoring the radio frequencies on Emma's equipment. I'm not hearing any pursuit chatter. They either don't know we took off, or they're not sure which direction we went. The Cessna's too old to show up on most radar systems, Emma explained. And without a transponder, we're essentially invisible to air traffic control. Katherine looked out at the darkness below, punctuated by occasional clusters of lights from small towns. Somewhere out there, federal agents were searching for them based on false information fed to them by people who were willing to commit mass murder to protect their operation. The question was whether they could stay free long enough to prove their innocence and expose the truth about what was really happening to America's commercial aviation system. How long until we reach Santa Fe? Katherine asked. About 2 hours, Emma replied. Try to get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a very long day, but Katherine couldn't rest. She kept thinking about Maria Vasquez, locked in some federal holding facility or worse, paying the price for discovering something she was never supposed to see. She thought about the other maintenance workers who had found similar evidence and been ignored or silenced. Most of all, she thought about the next commercial flight that would take off with unauthorized override equipment installed in its systems, and the passengers who had no idea they were traveling in an aircraft that could be remotely controlled by people with unknown motives. Flight 447 had been a test, or a warning, or a failed assassination attempt. But whatever it was, Katherine was certain it wouldn't be the last dot as the small Cessna flew through the night toward Santa Fe. She began formulating a plan that would either expose the conspiracy or get them all killed trying. The Santa Fe Regional Airport was a small facility that served primarily private aircraft and charter operations. Emma landed the vintage Cessna just after 3 a.m., taxiing toward a cluster of hangars at the far end of the field where Jake Morrison's charter service operated. Jake himself was waiting for them, a man in his 60s with graying hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades flying in all kinds of conditions. He helped them push the Cessna into his hangar, away from any curious eyes. Emma called me on the radio 20 minutes out, he explained to Katherine and Sarah. Said you're mixed up in some kind of federal situation involving aircraft sabotage. That's an understatement, Katherine replied. She quickly brought Jake up to speed on everything that had happened since Flight 447's emergency landing. Jake listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When Katherine finished, he was quiet for a long moment. I've been flying for 40 years, he said finally. Civilian, military, charter, you name it. And I've never heard of anything like what you're describing. Remote override systems on commercial aircraft would be the holy grail for terrorists or for anyone wanting to conduct covert operations. Do you think we're wrong? Sarah asked. Could there be a legitimate explanation for what Maria found? There might be, but not one that involves chasing innocent people across multiple states with false terrorism charges. Jake led them to his office area, which was equipped with computers and communication equipment, similar to Emma's setup. Let me make some calls to people I trust in the aviation community. See if anyone else has heard rumors about this Blackwater Aviation Services. While Jake worked his contacts, Emma helped Katherine and Sarah analyze the radio intercepts they'd recorded during their flight from Boulder. The federal manhunt was intensifying, with additional agencies being brought into the search. Look at this, Emma said, pointing to a transcript she'd made of the radio traffic. They're not just looking for us in Colorado anymore. They've issued BOLOs beyond the lookout orders for Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. And they're specifically mentioning small aircraft and private airports. Katherine felt their options narrowing. How long before they think to check? Here, not long, Jake said, looking up from his phone calls. But I've got some interesting information. I reached out to an old Air Force buddy who does consulting work for the FAA. He's never heard of Blackwater Aviation Services, but he has heard rumors about classified research into aircraft override systems. What kind of research? Supposedly, it's part of an anti-terrorism initiative. The theory is that if hijackers take control of an aircraft, ground controllers could override the hijackers and safely land the plane remotely. Sarah shook her head. But that doesn't explain why they'd test it on passenger flights without telling anyone. It doesn't, Jake agreed. Unless the testing isn't being done by the people who are supposed to be doing it. Katherine felt a chill of understanding. You mean someone else has gotten access to the technology? Or developed their own version of it? Katherine, if what you're telling me is true, we're not dealing with a rogue government program. We're dealing with someone who has the capability to take control of any aircraft equipped with their hardware. Emma had been monitoring news feeds on her laptop. There's something else. I just found a news report about a private jet that crashed in Montana yesterday. Small plane, 4 passengers, all killed. The cause is listed as pilot error, but the timing seems suspicious. Who was on the plane? Katherine asked. Emma read from the news report. A family from Denver. Businessman named Robert Chen and his wife and 2 children. Sarah gasped. Chen? That's my family name. Could be relatives. I have cousins in Denver. Katherine felt pieces of a larger picture beginning to emerge. Sarah, could this Robert Chen be connected to you somehow? Someone the people behind this might think you contacted? I don't know. My family's been in Denver for 3 generations. There are a lot of Chuns in the area. Jake was already pulling up more information about the Montana crash. According to the preliminary report, the pilot lost control during approach to a small airport near Billings. But the weather was clear, and the pilot was highly experienced. Another test of the override system, Emma suggested. Or an elimination of potential witnesses, Katherine said grimly. If they're willing to crash airliners to cover their tracks, they wouldn't hesitate to take out a small plane. Jake's expression had grown very serious. Ladies, if you're right about this, we're dealing with people who have the capability and willingness to kill anyone who threatens their operation. You need to understand, every minute you stay in one place, you're putting yourselves and anyone helping you at greater risk. Katherine was about to respond when Jake's radio crackled with an urgent transmission. All units, Santa Fe Regional Airport. Federal aircraft approaching from the northeast. 8 of 15 minutes. Prepare for immediate search and containment operation. Emma was already moving toward the hangar doors. We need to leave. Now, wait, Jake said. Running isn't going to solve anything. They'll just keep expanding the search until they find you. You need to go on the offensive. What do you mean? Jake pulled up a map on his computer. Los Angeles. You said there was a maintenance worker at LAX who found similar equipment. If you can get there and make contact with her, you might be able to build a case strong enough to force the legitimate authorities to take notice. How do we get to Los Angeles without being caught? I've got a Beechcraft that can make the trip on 1 tank of fuel. More importantly, I've got connections at small airports along the way where you can refuel without going through major terminals. Sarah was monitoring the radio frequencies. They're coordinating with local law enforcement. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they arrive here. Jake was already moving toward the larger aircraft at the other end of his hangar. The Beechcraft is faster and has better range than the Cessna. I'll file a flight plan for Phoenix under a corporate name they won't recognize immediately. Jake, you don't have to do this, Katherine protested. You're risking everything to help us. He paused in his pre-flight preparations. Katherine, 40 years ago I took an oath to defend this country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. If someone's using our own aviation system to conduct terrorist operations against innocent people, that oath still applies. They transferred to Jake's Beechcraft Baron, just as the sound of approaching helicopters became audible in the distance. The twin-engine aircraft was significantly faster than the Cessna, capable of cruising at 200 miles per hour with a range that would easily reach Los Angeles. Flight plan filed for Phoenix, Jake announced as they taxied toward the runway, but we'll deviate once we're airborne. Air traffic control won't notice the course change until we're already in California. As they lifted off into the pre-dawn darkness, Katherine could see the searchlights of federal vehicles converging on the airport below. They'd missed their quarry by less than 5 minutes. The flight to Los Angeles took 4 hours, during which Emma worked tirelessly on her laptop, trying to piece together the scope of the conspiracy they'd uncovered. What she found was even more disturbing than they'd imagined. I've been cross-referencing aircraft incidents over the past year, she reported as they flew over the Arizona desert. There have been 17 unexplained mechanical failures on commercial flights, all involving Boeing 737s, all on specific routes. What kind of pattern? Sarah asked. The routes all connect major cities with significant defense contractor populations. Seattle to Denver, San Diego to Dallas, Atlanta to Washington, D.C. It's like someone's been mapping the movement of people involved in classified defense work. Katherine felt a chill of understanding. They're not just testing the override system. They're using it to track and potentially eliminate specific individuals. Jake, who had been monitoring radio frequencies while flying, looked back at them. Grimly, there's something else. I've been listening to federal coordination channels, and they're talking about a Broken Arrow situation. What's Broken Arrow? Sarah asked. It's a military code for a nuclear weapon that's been lost or stolen. Katherine replied, her military training providing the answer. But why would they be discussing that in connection with us? Emma's laptop chimed with an incoming message. It's from my contact at the FAA, she announced. He's been doing some quiet investigating into Blackwater Aviation Services. Her face went pale as she read. Katherine, Blackwater isn't just installing override systems on aircraft. They're installing them on aircraft that transport nuclear materials. The implications hit Katherine like a physical blow. They're not planning to crash passenger planes. They're planning to steal nuclear weapons or materials during transport. Jake immediately began adjusting their course. Lax is still our best bet, but we need to get this information to someone who can act on it immediately. Emma, can your FAA contact be trusted with this? Yes, but Katherine, if we're right about nuclear materials being the target, we're dealing with a conspiracy that goes way beyond aviation terrorism. This is about national security at the highest levels. Sarah had been quiet during this exchange, but now she spoke up with a troubled expression. There's something I didn't tell you before. During our evacuation from Flight 447, I overheard Captain Morrison talking to air traffic control. He mentioned that our flight had been carrying special cargo that needed to be secured immediately after landing. Katherine and Emma stared at her. What kind of special cargo? I don't know, but there were federal agents waiting for it before the passengers were even evacuated. And they weren't the same agents who took Maria into custody. Jake was already reaching for his radio. I'm contacting my friend at the FAA. This is too big for us to handle alone. But before he could make the call, their radio crackled with an ominous transmission. Unidentified Beechcraft Baron, this is F-16 flight leader. You are ordered to change course to Nellis Air Force Base immediately. Failure to comply will result in your aircraft being shot down. Through the cockpit windows, they could see two military jets approaching from their left, sleek and deadly against the morning sky. Act 3B, final confrontation. Jake, what do we do? Katherine asked, trying to keep the fear out of her voice. Jake's hands were steady on the controls, his voice calm despite the circumstances. We comply, but we make sure this conversation is recorded and transmitted to multiple recipients. He switched his radio to emergency frequency and began broadcasting. Mayday, Mayday. This is Beechcraft November 77 Papa Mike. We are civilian aircraft being forced down by military fighters. We are carrying information about a national security threat involving compromised commercial aviation systems. The F-16 leader's response was immediate and cold. Cease all transmissions immediately. Follow our lead aircraft to Nellis Air Force Base. But Jake continued broadcasting. We have evidence of unauthorized equipment installed on commercial aircraft by a company called Blackwater Aviation Services. Equipment capable of remote override of pilot controls. Aircraft carrying nuclear materials may be compromised. Emma was frantically working on her laptop. I'm transmitting everything we've collected to my FAA contact, plus backup copies to news outlets and congressional oversight committees. The F-16 leader's voice returned, and this time there was uncertainty in it. Beechcraft November 77 Papa Mike. State the nature of your evidence regarding nuclear material transport. Jake looked at Katherine, who made a quick decision. This is Katherine Martinez, former Army medic and witness to the attempted sabotage of Flight 447 last night. I have direct evidence that commercial aircraft are being equipped with remote override systems that could be used to hijack planes carrying sensitive cargo. There was a long pause before the F-16 leader responded. Beechcraft, you will follow us to Nellis, but you will not be harmed. We are investigating your claims. As they changed course toward the Nevada Air Base, Katherine realized they had reached a critical juncture. Either they were about to be silenced permanently, Or they had finally reached someone in the military who could act on their evidence. Nellis Air Force Base was a sprawling complex in the Nevada desert, home to advanced fighter training and classified military operations. As they landed under F-16 escort, Katherine could see that this was no ordinary military response. Dozens of vehicles surrounded their aircraft, including what appeared to be counterintelligence personnel and federal agents. But the man who approached their aircraft as they shut down the engines wasn't wearing a uniform. He was a civilian, inexpensive suit, flanked by military officers and federal agents who clearly deferred to his authority. "Ms. Martinez, Ms. Chen, my name is Director James Blackwood, and I oversee certain classified operations for the Department of Defense. We need to talk." They were escorted to a secure conference room where Blackwood laid out the truth behind everything they had experienced. "Blackwater Aviation Services is a legitimate government contractor," he began. "But 3 months ago, we discovered that someone had infiltrated their operation and was using their access to install unauthorized equipment on specific aircraft." Katherine felt pieces falling into place. The fake federal agents. They weren't trying to cover up a government program. They were trying to cover up their infiltration of it. Exactly. Maria Vasquez discovered equipment that we didn't install. Equipment that was more sophisticated than our own systems and designed for a very different purpose. Emma leaned forward. "What purpose?" Blackwood activated a large display screen that showed a map of the United States with various flight routes highlighted. 3 aircraft per month transport components for nuclear weapons between production facilities and military installations. The routes and schedules are classified, but someone has been tracking them. Sarah's face went pale. Flight 447 was carrying nuclear materials, components, not weapons, but valuable enough that foreign intelligence services or terrorist organizations would pay billions to intercept them. Katherine was putting the final pieces together. So the emergency landing wasn't meant to kill passengers. It was meant to force the plane down so they could steal the nuclear components. That's our assessment. But Maria Vasquez's discovery forced them to abort the operation. They triggered the override system prematurely, hoping to crash the plane and eliminate the evidence. Jake spoke up for the first time since they'd landed. "What about the manhunt? The terrorism charges against Katherine and Sarah?" Blackwood's expression darkened. "The infiltrators have people inside federal law enforcement agencies. They convinced multiple departments that you were foreign agents attempting to sabotage our aviation security research." Emma looked skeptical. "Why should we believe you? How do we know you're not part of the conspiracy?" Instead of answering directly, Blackwood pressed a button on the conference table. The door opened, and Maria Vasquez walked in, escorted by a military officer but clearly not under arrest. "Katherine." Maria rushed to embrace her. "Thank God you're safe. These people, the real federal agents, they rescued me from the fake ones about 6 hours ago." Katherine felt a wave of relief mixed with residual suspicion. "Maria, are you okay? What happened after they took you at the airport?" "The fake agents took me to a warehouse outside Denver. They wanted me to tell them where I'd hidden backup copies of my recordings. When I wouldn't cooperate, they weren't gentle about asking." Director Blackwood's expression was grim. "We tracked down the warehouse based on cell phone intercepts, but not before they'd attempted to extract information through interrogation. Ms. Vasquez has been extremely helpful in identifying the scope of the infiltration." Maria sat down at the conference table, her left arm in a sling but her eyes clear and determined. "Katherine, it's worse than we thought. The equipment I found wasn't just on Flight 447. They've been installing it on dozens of aircraft over the past 6 months, targeting specific routes and cargo manifests." "How many aircraft are compromised?" Emma asked. Blackwood pulled up another display. 37 confirmed installations, with an estimated dozen more that we haven't located yet. all on Boeing 737s used for routes that carry classified materials or personnel. Sarah was studying the route map. This is a massive operation. How many people would it take to pull off something like this? We estimate a core group of 15 to 20 individuals, but with support networks that could include 50 or more people. Some are foreign nationals, others are American citizens who've been recruited or coerced. Katherine looked at Maria. The recording you made, is that enough evidence to shut down their operation? It's part of it. But Katherine, the most important evidence isn't on my recording, it's in your head. What do you mean? Director Blackwood leaned forward. Ms. Martinez, during Flight 447's emergency, you observed details that no one else noticed. The timing of the system failures, the specific nature of the mechanical problems, the behavior of the aircraft during the forced landing. You're the only witness who has the technical background to testify about how the override system actually functioned. Katherine felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders once again. You want me to testify in court? In front of a closed Congressional Intelligence Committee, initially. But yes, eventually in court when we prosecute the conspirators. Emma raised her hand. What about the manhunt? Katherine and Sarah are still wanted fugitives. That's being resolved as we speak. The fake terrorism charges are being withdrawn, and we're identifying which federal agents were deliberately misled versus which ones were part of the conspiracy. Jake, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. Director Blackwood, I have one question. How do we know this ends here? How do we know there aren't other operations like this one, targeting different aspects of our transportation infrastructure? Blackwood was quiet for a long moment. We don't. This investigation has revealed vulnerabilities in our security systems that we never knew existed. Ms. Martinez and Ms. Chen didn't just help us stop one terrorist operation. They exposed a methodology that could be used to compromise any system that relies on remote electronic control. Katherine looked around the room at the faces of people who had risked everything to expose the truth. What happens now? Now you help us finish the job. We've arrested 12 of the conspirators so far, but the leadership is still at large. We need your testimony to build cases that will hold up in court and to identify any other compromised aircraft. Maria pulled out a tablet and showed Katherine a series of technical diagrams. I've been working with the FBI's technical team to analyze the override equipment. Katherine, your description of the aircraft's behavior during the emergency provided crucial details about how the system operates under stress. Sarah was studying the route maps on the display. Director Blackwood, what about the passengers and crew from Flight 447? Are they in any danger? They're all under protective surveillance until we're certain we've identified all the conspirators. But you, Ms. Martinez, and Ms. Vasquez are the primary targets because you have direct evidence of the conspiracy. Katherine made her decision. I'll testify. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure this never happens again. Katherine Martinez stood in the witness box of the federal courthouse in Denver, looking out at a packed courtroom as she concluded her testimony in the trial of United States v. Petrov et al. The defendants installed equipment designed to override pilot control of commercial aircraft, she stated clearly. Based on my observations during Flight 447's emergency landing, this equipment was sophisticated enough to simulate mechanical failures while actually controlling the aircraft remotely. The lead prosecutor, who happened to be Elena Martinez, Katherine's sister, had been cleared of all suspicions and assigned to the case, approached the witness stand. Ms. Martinez, in your expert opinion, what would have happened if the defendants had succeeded in their plan? Katherine looked directly at the jury. They would have gained access to classified nuclear materials worth billions of dollars on the black market. And 149 innocent people would have died to cover their tracks. The trial had been the culmination of 6 months of investigation that had unraveled a conspiracy involving foreign intelligence services, compromised federal contractors, and corrupted government officials. 17 people had been indicted, including several high-ranking executives at companies with defense contracts. Maria Vasquez, who had testified earlier in the week, was in the gallery with her brother Miguel. She had become a key witness for the FBI and was planning to attend college on a scholarship from a foundation that supported whistleblowers. Sarah Chen had returned to her job as a flight attendant, but now worked with the FAA to develop new security protocols for detecting unauthorized modifications to aircraft systems. Captain Morrison and the other crew members from Flight 447 had also testified, providing crucial evidence about the aircraft's behavior during the emergency. Emma Reeves and Jake Morrison were in the gallery as well, having been recognized by Congress for their assistance in exposing the conspiracy. Emma had been appointed to a new federal task force on aviation security, while Jake continued his charter operation, but now also served as a consultant for the Transportation Security Administration, but perhaps the most significant presence in the courtroom was Agent Robert Hayes, or rather, the man who had impersonated Agent Hayes. His real name was Viktor Petrov, and he was a former Russian intelligence officer who had orchestrated the entire operation. He sat at the defendant's table, his expression carefully neutral as Katherine's testimony sealed his fate. As Katherine concluded her testimony and stepped down from the witness stand, she reflected on how much had changed since that night 6 months ago when she'd pressed her face against the window of Flight 447 and watched Denver's skyline shrink below them. The investigation had revealed that the conspiracy went far beyond aviation terrorism. The defendants had been building a network capable of compromising multiple transportation and infrastructure systems, with the ultimate goal of destabilizing American logistics and defense capabilities. But they had been stopped, and the systems they'd compromised had been secured. More importantly, the vulnerabilities they'd exploited had been identified and addressed, making the entire transportation network more secure. Outside the courthouse, Katherine was surrounded by reporters asking for her thoughts on the verdict that would be announced later that day. "I just want people to understand that our safety depends on ordinary citizens being willing to speak up when they see something wrong," she said. Maria Vasquez, Sarah Chen, Emma Reeves, Jake Morrison, all of us were just people doing our jobs who happened to notice something that didn't belong. The system works when people are willing to take risks to protect others. A reporter called out, "Ms. Martinez, what's next for you?" Katherine smiled, thinking about the job offer she'd received from the Department of Homeland Security to head a new program training federal agents in technical threat assessment. "I'm going back to work," she said simply. "There's always more to do to keep people safe." As the reporters dispersed and Katherine walked away from the courthouse, she thought about Seat 8A on Flight 447, the seat that had placed her at the center of a conspiracy that could have changed the course of American history. Sometimes the most important moments in life began with the most ordinary circumstances. Getting on a plane, sitting in an assigned seat, looking out a window at a familiar skyline. But those ordinary moments had led to extraordinary responsibilities, and Katherine had learned that heroism wasn't about seeking out danger. It was about doing the right thing when danger found you. The jury would return a guilty verdict 3 hours later, sentencing Viktor Petrov and his co-conspirators to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Flight 447 would be remembered not as a near disaster, but as the incident that exposed and stopped one of the most sophisticated terrorist plots in American history. And Katherine Martinez would return to her work protecting others, carrying with her the knowledge that sometimes a single person in the right place at the right time could make all the difference in the world. The silver cross her grandmother had given her, the same cross that had protected 3 generations of Martinez women through wars, disasters, and heartbreak, remained around her neck, A reminder that courage was often inherited, and that the willingness to protect others was one of humanity's greatest strengths. In the end, Seat 8 had been exactly where Katherine Martinez needed to be. Creating stories of this depth and complexity requires countless hours of research, writing, and careful crafting to ensure every plot thread comes together satisfyingly. If you've enjoyed this epic tale of courage, conspiracy, and the power of speaking truth to power, please show your support by hitting that like button and sharing this story with friends who appreciate detailed, engaging narratives. Most importantly, if you want to continue experiencing stories like this, full novels, told with the attention to detail and character development they deserve, please subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. Your subscription helps us continue creating these immersive, book-length stories that transport you to other worlds and keep you captivated from beginning to end. What did you think of Katherine's journey? Did the conclusion satisfy you? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one and love hearing your thoughts about these stories. And if you have suggestions for future stories, whether they're thrillers like this one, mysteries, adventures, or any other genre, please share them. Your input helps shape the content we create. Thank you again for being part of this storytelling community. Until next time, keep looking for the extraordinary in the ordinary. And remember, sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply pay attention to what others might overlook. Subscribe now, and let's continue this incredible journey together.